last speaker, Sidney Bruce and Andrew Packer. And I've known Sidney for some time. She's great at this stuff, especially when it comes to team experience. This is kind of more of the HR side, and this is where the benefits and the HR kind of meet. So I'll let you take the stage here and go ahead and give yourself a quick introduction, and Andrew as well. Give her a hand.
Oh no, that makes me more nervous than I already am.
That's why I did it.
He knows he knows that I hate presenting. I get super nervous. So thanks a lot.
You're welcome. That's
oh yeah, Andrew should be in charge of all the important things. So my name is Sidney, and I've known CUI for quite a while. I owned an outsourced HR company, and I'll explain to you a little bit later why that's important. We focus a lot on the tactical details of HR for small businesses. So usually they just need extra help. As all of you know, especially in the small business world, HR will be with the CEO or with the office manager or with finance. Ooh. And there's never enough hands. I know. You all know what I'm talking about. It's true. So yeah, that's kind of what I did. I was lucky enough to meet Andrew about a little over a year ago through a client, and so we're excited to kind of share how we got to this point. So Andrew, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Andrew Packer. I'm a newbie to human resources. I actually have made a career out of customer experience, and spent plenty of time at some great companies here in Utah, Entrada, Podium, Lucid Software, helping to build customer experience motions and operations for SaaS companies. I know it's kind of a dirty word now, the last few weeks anyways. So yeah, that's me. And as Sidney indicated, we were kind of thrown into the trenches together, and we were able to do some really cool things together at my current company, Mark.
Yes. We'll share that scary story. It's a bad one.
So the really interesting thing, as we talk about this story, is I was thrown into a human resources role at Mark, and it was very cool for me to see how transferable my experience building customer experiences and my experience managing customer relationships transferred into human resources and into people management and into people experience management. And Sidney and I worked really closely together. She was kind of like the engine, and she figured out all the things that I needed to do to help our little fledgling company figure out the human or the employee experience. And it clicked in my mind that customer experience and employee experience are the same thing, and that one influences the other, and that without an effective employee experience, your customer experience is terrible, and that your customer experience, if it's bad, will absolutely impact your employee experience. If you don't have a good customer experience, your employees are going to be grumpy, and it's going to be a self-defeating cycle. And this character right here, this is a Ren. It's a Chinese character, and it's people. And so we just came to realize that if you have an effective customer experience and employee experience, then you're going to have an effective people experience or a Ren experience.
Oh, that's me. So today we're going to share a couple stories, like I promised, and what we learned from them, and then go into how we kind of fix some of the problems. And Andrew, I think one of the very first conversations we met when we were doing an acquisition, we'll tell a little bit about that, was, oh, you're going to be perfect for HR because it's the same. I'm just touching on what he says there. Everything that you do in CS world transfers right into HR. So I'm excited to talk about a couple failing stories that we had and where we learned from there. You want to start?
Yeah, so all right. So this is a really interesting story. You guys should all be familiar with it.
Yeah, who's been watching this Twitter disaster go down, right? It is so part of it could be from leadership, right? Pushing, I think it was like they had a 2-week deadline or something, November 1st, they didn't want to pay out the bonuses, right? So we're going to lay off all of these people. And what happened in those 2 weeks? It was just absolute chaos. There was no planning, no strategy around how they were going to take how they were going to lay these people off, what that experience was going to have for the customers. And so it was just a complete nightmare. Some of the things that you will see, and I'm sure you heard in the news, there's executives that were fired by email. There was engagement. I read something that an engineer manager was actually had to go lay off a couple of people or his team and had physical reactions. He's throwing up in the middle of the floor, right? It was because of a lack of planning on the employee experience. It just turned into absolute chaos. And so, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so this is the favorite piece of the Twitter story, right? I don't know if you guys know who these two people are. They are not Twitter employees. But for 48 hours, every news outlet in the United States was running a story about these two laid off Twitter engineers. And they were out there showing their biography of Michelle Obama. And because they did not have an effective employee experience mapped out for how they were going to manage this process, it allowed all sorts of FUD, to enter into the company's life cycle, right? And that FUD made its way to the customers. Because they had a bad employee experience, all of a sudden customers were like, Twitter's gonna die, there's not gonna be a Twitter anymore. Are the servers gonna go down? Are there gonna be engineers available to take down bad things that crop up? Everyone was worried about Twitter and Twitter's solvency because they didn't have an effective employee experience planned out, and they didn't have an effective customer experience planned out either, right? So their customer communications mechanism was Elon Musk, at 3 o'clock in the morning, sending whatever random tweet he wanted to everyone in the Twitterverse. Yeah. So that was their customer comms mechanism. Which is awesome and fine because Elon's crazy and it was super entertaining.
Awesome plan for us.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It was a great dumpster fire to watch.
Definitely. I mean, when the tactical details aren't aligned, they're sending out wrong emails to the employees on who's terminated, and then you have to take that badge and how, that's a miserable conversation. They didn't take badges away, then it was like, no one can come into work because we don't have access to the building. We don't know who's here or who's not here. There are people, that then quit because it's like, what is going on here?
So we want to talk a little bit about maybe a more personal story, right? So this one you are all familiar with. We want to share a story of how Sidney and I met, and something that's near and dear to my heart because I think it aged me 4 years. So up until a year and a half ago, I worked for Lucid Software, which is an amazing company here in Utah. I worked for a business unit within Lucid Software called Lucid Press, and we produce an amazing product that helps companies market more effectively. We operated as a separate business unit. We had a separate customer base. We had a separate sales team, a separate operations and support team, a separate engineering team. And then we shared services. We shared finance, we shared we shared people ops or human resources. We shared payroll and all of the legal and all of those things. So because Lucid Press didn't have any sort of synergy selling into the same customer base that Lucid Chart did, their primary product, and vice versa, and we were a divergent product and we were diverging, it made sense for both entities, for the business unit, Lucid Press, and for Lucid Software, for a parting of ways. And so a few executives on the Lucid Press team went out and found a growth equity company who acquired Mark, Lucid Press. We've since transitioned into Mark. And so we were acquired, and let me tell you what, I would rather start a business from scratch than do a carve out ever again, because I think it's one of the most stressful things anyone could go through. I used to not have any gray hair.
I think we both got gray hair.
Yeah.
And it's a perfect example of not having an experience map. So this is kind of hard to see, but I'll kind of walk you through this. When they get to the acquisition part, it was I think 24, maybe 48 hours when they hired me. And I say, I'm HR, I'm in the tactical and the details, right? When I come on board, the theory of the HR and the acquisition was in place. We want our benefits to transfer over. We don't want there to be a lapse in coverage. They need to have all of the same type of benefits that they had at the other organization, because we want people to feel confident that they're not losing things going from a big organization to the small, right? All the theory is there. All the strategy was in place. What was not in place was how we're going to execute on that strategy. And a lot of times that's what happens. You fly through, you think you've got this great strategy going on, but then you get down to the details. It's like, how are we going to do this? So when I get brought on, we'll start with benefits, because that was the biggest. It was absolutely crazy. So I sit down, I meet with the broker, right? How are we going to map these over? I start asking the tactical questions. How are these employees going to enroll? Oh, we've got 50 employees. We're going to do paper enrollment because we don't have time to set up an online employee navigator. And I'm like, oh, we're going to do what now? This is in the middle of, COVID, things are going on. So you've got 50 employees that we're going to enroll in benefits, various benefits. You've got your 401k, your standard health. I mean, there was a million, tons, So all of that we're going to do virtually and from paper. So it was, we had 24, 48 hours to get it set up. So the tactical details were not there. So what happened was we said, okay, we don't have time to get it. We're here. We're in crisis management mode. So we're just going to figure this out. Did the best that we could. We send out the documents, and then employees, what do they have to do? They have to print them. Then they have to sign the package. They had to upload it and get it back to us. And then by that point, you've got has anyone ever done paper enrollments before? Okay, so huge human error, because of course the broker has to get them from the paper into the system for the benefit. And it was crazy. 50 employees, probably 10 different enrollment documents that were there. And so there was mix matching. We had employees that were under the wrong, like a kid that was under the wrong parent. I mean, it's human error, right? So the most that you can.
But we have since adopted him. We love him. We're really glad.
Yes, Andrew, thank you for that. Taking that class down. So it was just absolutely crazy, right? Because we didn't have the tactical side of what the experience was going to be. And so that's just one example of all of the craziness that happened. But then, you're having these new employees that come in. What we wanted, the strategy was for them to feel comfortable and safe coming into this new organization. And would you feel comfortable if you go to get your benefits and you're looking down your kid? You're like, I'm single, I don't have a kid. How would you feel about the organization and the future of that company, right? Not too great. I see heads shaking like, yeah, you'd be nervous, right? So a lack of just the tactical planning can create so many more issues down the line.
So we had some big takeaways from this experience, right? I had some big takeaways personally. I got voluntold that I was going to be in charge of HR, working in tandem with Sidney, which was a surprise to me. I was really excited about the opportunity to split off from Lucid Software and to forge our own destiny as a new entity, as Mark. Really exciting opportunity, as a career, and it's an opportunity to build a new company. But this was a new challenge, and luckily I had a great mentor to guide me through the nuances of human resources. But we learned some really important lessons, and we're going to walk through some of the lessons that we learned. And we learned that the two things are inextricably bound: customer success and employee success equal people success, or equal RX. And we saw that there was an impact, right? When our employees were unhappy, our customers were unhappy. We had 80% attrition from our sales team. 80%. So a sales team, 80% of our employees left within the next 6 months on our sales team. What does that do to our ability to sell new products, right? To sell our product to our customers. Luckily, we had worked hard. I had worked really hard to make sure that we had an effective transition plan for our customers. And so there was no FUD for our existing customers, but our new customer acquisition really suffered. And so we kind of tried to distill the things that we learned into 3 key tenets. So the first is be intentional of your employee, be intentional as you create an employee and people experience. The second is we need to make sure that we have mechanisms in place so that we're aware of how our employees and how our customers are feeling, and that we can address those. And then finally, we want to make sure that we're effectively agile in navigating those concerns and constantly refreshing and adjusting our RX, our people experience.
And I just want to,
go ahead, no,
sorry. I
please.
was just saying, this is such an opportunity for people that are in HR because this is pretty standard for customer success, right? You have a journey, a map of what your customers are going to do. And so it's such an opportunity for HR people to adapt what the CS experience is and say, okay, it's the same thing from start to beginning, or, start to end. And that's where we were like, okay, we're onto something. Combine the two.
So how did we fix the big problem that we had at Mark, right? How did we fix this problem? Well, the first thing we did was we were intentional. We wanted to craft an intentional strategy. And where do you craft your strategy, right? You start at the very bottom. And we created a core foundational, like, employee and customer philosophy. What is our philosophy around people experience? And you can see Google has a core philosophy for how they interact with people. Don't be evil. Now, are they always on board with that? Do they always do it? I don't know. Like, you be the judge. But right, they have this motto. They have this core philosophy that guides their interaction with people.
So I want to talk a little bit about how that helps you make decisions, right? So we look at Chick-fil-A to be good stewards who create positive impact on all who come in contact with Chick-fil-A. So do you feel that when you go through the drive-in, that the employees are showing up in that way, right? This is something that is preached over and over and over again in their training. And the same thing with Mark, teamwork over ego. And I love this one. This is one of my favorite philosophies that are out there. And I think it's because, at the end of the day, what kind of organization are you going to be? Are you going to hire jerks or you're not going to hire jerks? And so how you can tactically put this into place when you're making decisions, like recruiting is a good example. And I know that Andrew has specifically not hired employees. And we say, okay, teamwork over ego. Is this new person going to fit in or not, right?
Yeah, so we were hiring for a creative role, and this creator was brilliant. The stuff that he was producing just made designers like excited and happy, right? He was brilliant, but we had serious concerns about teamwork over ego. And so we decided, during the final stages of the interview, that he was not an effective cultural fit because he did not adhere to the core tenet that we have that governs our philosophy, our interaction with people, whether they're employees or customers. And we deliberately worked together as an organization, as an executive team, and as employees to craft this or make sure that this was adopted by our company. And we talk about it all the time. This is what our people experience is founded on or based on, is this core tenet or philosophy.
I just want to add one other place. So that's in the, when we're thinking about the employee or customer journey, making decisions on who to bring into our organization. How many of you have ever worked with someone who's a total jerk? And you just wish that they were not there, right? This also applies to that. It helps make those decisions quickly. You may have somebody that does not fit in the organization, but they're killing it on their sales stats, right? They're doing great. And when we sit down and we look at your team to do a review, which we all do, we're always thinking about our philosophy, teamwork over ego. Are they or are they not hitting that? Is that part of their goals? It helps make those decisions on, do you have the right people, even once they're already hired, things shift to move them out of the business.
And if you've never worked with the total jerk, guess what? You're the total jerk.
That is totally fair. It's absolutely the truth.
All right. So first things first, be intentional. We want to establish our core philosophy. So that's our strategy. Next, we have to make sure that we have effective operational planning. So operational planning, like we've got to plan the campaign. So you can see this is an example of a customer lifecycle at Mark or Lucid Press. This was the name when I created this. So this is the customer lifecycle. And you can see I have every interaction over the course of an entire year for our customer, every proactive interaction mapped out. I know on what day, so you can see contract plus 90, they're going to have an interaction with a specific individual at my organization. I know, and in this software, Lucid Chart, it's a great tool. You should buy it. Have a little equity there. You should buy it. Every one of these, you can click into it and you can see the specific details of what that interaction looks like. And we'll talk a little bit about that more later as we're as we're involved in tactics. But if you don't want your customer experience or your employee experience, if you don't want the tail wagging the dog, you have to sit down, devote time, and plan out what that employee or customer experience looks like. And if you have a holistic people experience, if you plan your customer experience in tandem with your employee experience, then you get an experience like Chick-fil-A where everyone says, "How may I help you?" or "Have a blessed day," right? You get that type of experience that sets you apart from other businesses.
So it's the same thing if you take this CS, right, and you take this operational planning, you can move it to the next slide, Rich, which is the HR one, and do the exact same thing on your people. And where does that start? That starts when you post a job, right? Or even before you decide to post a job and hire someone. It's in those conversations that you're having about who are we going to hire? What does that look like? What's the application process? And so when we're creating these operational planning, and we'll give you an opportunity to be able to download these things or get them from us, it's the journey, right? But we want to know, how do you want your employees to feel at this end, right? That helps you answer the questions on how you're tactically going to execute on those items. So are they going to apply on Indeed? Are they going to apply on LinkedIn? And then there's the back end part of it, right? Like internal ownership. What does that mean? If you've got people, so on the HR, if you handle, recruiting, let's say, what is your experience like as the employer in recruiting? You post a job. Do you have to go to Indeed, LinkedIn, and ZipRecruiter and pull all of those resumes in together? Or is your experience that it all filters into one ATS? So creating this journey map for employees, you get to start, it gets you on a path of asking those deeper questions. That takes you down to technology. Sweet, we need to check this out. But creating this map for your employees starts to get you thinking the same thing. So, and then if we talk benefits, right? You'll have once a year your open enrollment. Where are your employees going to get notified there? How does that happen? Who is responsible for that? I say that you should market your employees the same way that you do your customers. In CS, it's widely acceptable. You want to have one company voice, right? Your sales team is going to come in and you want all of that to, no matter who you're speaking to, whether it's an executive that's sending emails to the customer, a frontline employee, one company voice. It's the same thing with your employee experience, taking control over that. I mean, some communications that go out from one person is different than the other. So having that, company voice internally is where you'll be able to create that in the operational mapping.
When I have a new customer success manager, implementation manager, support member join our teams, the first thing they learn about is our core philosophies, right? The core values that guide our company. They learn that teamwork over ego is how we operate. They learn that we want to be a best-in-class customer experience. And they have an onboarding flow that looks just like the onboarding flow for our customers that I showed you. And how do you think that positions them and prepares them to interact with their customers when they're interacting with the 7-figure customer, right? They know that this is how we interact with our customers. They have those core philosophies like etched into their heart. So once you have an op plan in place, an operational plan in place, you need to have tactical planning so that you can execute perfectly tactically. And so, I showed you on the previous slide that every one of those little life cycles had something that you could click into. And this is one of those things that you can click into. This is a deliverable for a customer when they're implementing LucidPress or Mark. We've rebranded since the separation of the bifurcation. But here you have, in addition to this, right? This is just the checklist for a customer, but there are explicit instructions and a link to an Asana task board so that my implementation managers know exactly how to engage with the customer, and they're empowered to engage with that customer effectively. So every interaction, you have 3 levels. You have the core strategy, you have the operational strategy or the operational planning, and then you have the tactics that the employees are going to use as they engage with those customers.
Yeah. One thing I love about this exercise, and if you follow our steps, how we've done it, it's not as complex as you would think once you do the operational and you dig into the tactics. But what this eliminates by taking the time to put together this plan for each organization is institutional knowledge going out the window, when somebody leaves. which is something that we're all worried about. I mean, people stay at an organization for 2 years, right? So if you have something like this in place and you've taken that time, you can go to that task, and then it serves as like a training mechanism for new employees that are coming in, whether it's CS, whether it's finance, whether it's into HR. So if we have this mapped out, you know, like again, down to how do you post a job? And then, you know, mid-year, you know, you're going to have your mid-year reviews or however you do that. That's in your experience map. How does that, you know, how does that align? Here are the communications. These are the steps that we take. So yeah, it's kind of twofold. I like it for the training as well.
So you've created this amazing, like, people experience. You have an experience map created for both your employees and for your customers, and you're executing effectively against all the planning that you have in place. Now, I'm sure that you guys are better than me and that you always get it right the first time. But like I've found that the world constantly changes, customer experience constantly changes, preferences change, employee experience, employee preferences change. So you have to effectively gather data and understand how people are feeling about the plan that you put in place in order to make sure that you have an exceptional customer experience and an intentional customer experience. So this is an example of actual NPS data. I won't tell you how fresh or from what organization it's a part of so that you can't, you know, maybe your spies for Canva. But this is our NPS data. So this lets me know how we're doing and where we're trending. And gosh dang it, we had a dip in November of 2022. And why did we have that dip? Well, it turns out there were some performance issues during that month, right? So this helps us identify and helps us later on address those issues.
Yeah, it's stories and stats. So when you're looking at your customer side, right, we take this on the employee side, and you're able to sit in a meeting and he says, okay, there's a dip in what's happening with our customers and their experience, but there's also this going on with the employees. And so it's creating those surveys that you have. So once you roll out in, you know, something new on the HR side, how are we doing? How do our people feel about these decisions? How are they feeling about, you know, work from home or not? Constantly having that, you know, a heat map on where your employees are and how they're feeling. And I think we can go to the next slide. It's the same.
Yeah, the last thing I wanted to say is like there was a direct correlation between our eNPS and this NPS, particularly from the teams that I manage, because they're the ones that are interfacing with grumpy customers, right? And grumpy customers absolutely impact employee satisfaction.
Yep. So having that data together, you can piece the puzzle, put the puzzle together. Yeah. You know what I'm trying to say.
I love it.
One of these, this is an actual survey from a client of ours, and what they said is, if I hadn't seen a change in direction, I would have started looking for a new role. So if we take, you know, that's impactful, right? It's good to know that these changes that you're implementing are working or not working, but it does have an effect if you're not, you know, have a strategic approach for your employees. They're going to start looking for something different. One other thing I want to add on this, especially when it's whether it's CS or it's HR, it's the same thing. If you are not prepared to take action on whatever reviews that you get back, it can almost cause a worse impact on your culture, your customer experience, because they say, you know, we're being vulnerable, we're being open on what you're doing, and you're not going to make any changes. So you can't make every change, right? I mean, I've seen some surveys that come in and you're just like, oh my gosh, okay. More options for pizza on Wednesday. Sorry. Okay. You know what I mean? The little things, but you have to have that hope and you have to be okay with bad things that are coming back and have that forethought. Okay, how are we going to fix this? Right? What actions are we going to take?
And that's why it's important to be agile, right? We never get things right the first time, ever. And one of the benefits that I have now in a startup outside of Lucid Software is we're able to move so much more quickly. We don't have to worry about 700 other employees or 800 other employees to make a decision. We can make a decision today, implement it tomorrow, and judge the effectiveness of that decision in 2 or 3 months. And so that's why being agile is so important. So I want to talk briefly about Voice of the Customer report. And I have implemented this at every organization that I've been a part of. We collate all of the customer feedback every quarter. So there is a team of dedicated people as part of their extracurricular activities outside of their normal job. They gather all the data, whether it's from NPS, CSAT, regular customer interactions, support tickets that come in. They put it all together, synthesize that into a consumable report, and that is delivered to the executive leadership team on a quarterly basis. It is a forcing function. It forces us to look at our employee and customer experience regularly and make decisions and determinations about how effective it is and make adjustments in order to make it better.
Yeah. And what I love about this is a lot of times it becomes analysis paralysis once you're starting to get the feedback, right? You have all this data coming in. What do we do? So forcing it into the voice of a customer or the voice of your employees, that's what you do with the data, right? It's not just sitting there. You can start making strategic decisions and start to change and adjust based on data, right? And it's not just stories. I think you hear a lot like, oh, I saw this one review, and there's stats behind your stories then, right? So it makes it more impactful.
And actually, Entrada is a great example. Did I hear that you were working with Entrada? Yeah, Entrada is like a fantastic example of a company that did this. So they had a lot of feedback from employees about communication, a lot of feedback from employees about communication. And so they synthesized all this information and they came up with a new value. Talk to me, use. I don't know, is that still a value there?
Changing our values, but yes, it is one.
Oh no, well no, that's actually a great example, right? They're changing their values.
Yeah.
If they don't work anymore, they're updating them. They're being agile, right? So they implemented this new value and it really did help improve communication at Entrada at the time. Obviously it ran out of steam, so they had to make some updates.
Oh, this is my favorite.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot throughout this about failures, and we don't learn, it's the most important thing. We all fail. And I want to know by raising hands, how many of you have learned, think about, the best lessons in your life that you have learned, have they come from success? No. Have they come from doing something completely wrong? Right? That's where you learn. And I think it's interesting because people are afraid of failure, right? It's hard to talk about in the workplace. And why is that? I think you feel this sense of shame or, I don't want anyone to know. And so what does that do to your culture if you can't express or appreciate failure? It stunts growth. It stunts creativity because people have that fear of shame to be able to say, hey, I did this wrong. So we implement and talk all the time with people to celebrate those failures all the time. I have failure quarterly meetings. What did we screw up on? And how did we fix it? I have one client, they ring a bell once a week for all the biggest failure, right? This is what we did because it's such a learning opportunity. And if you can do that as leaders, what you end up doing is take the shame away from making mistakes and your team can grow and blossom. And then you can be agile. You'll have more creative thinking, right? So embrace the failures.
Yeah. And I just wanted to share this amazing example of someone taking extreme ownership. You guys know who SPF is? Sam Bankman-Fried lost $40 billion of other people's money. I'm sorry, that's the biggest thing. I screwed up, should have done better. I don't know if it's enough to keep him out of jail, but he was practicing extreme ownership and celebrating value.
Yeah. So, I don't know if you loved it, but it is, you should be.
So at the end of the day, we had this amazing experience, right? Where we went through this carve out and we aged a few years and we learned how important it is to be intentional about your employee experience and about your customer experience, about your people experience, your overarching people experience. We were aware, we implemented mechanisms to make sure that we were aware of all our people. And it made sure that, and then we implemented mechanisms to ensure that we were agile so that we were continually adjusting our people experience, whether it's for our employees or for our customers. And as a result, Mark is in an awesome place, a totally different place than we were last year. Our retention for both customers and for employees has increased significantly since the carve out, since the the decimation of the sales team, we call it. But things are so much better. So these experiences have codified in my mind the importance of creating an amazing people experience.
Yeah. I would agree. I think having some tactical awareness of how to, put these into place is going to be super helpful. And so that's something I do. We have a QR code that you can scan, and we will fill out a survey. We'll send you a journey map. And that's step one, right? Like once you have taken the time to create what your philosophy is, we do have templates for you to work through those customer and HR experiences. And so I think, yeah, that's all I wanted to add. I think you did a good job.
Yeah, that's the end. Thank you so much for your time.